You're welcome to Newsnight, where we speak to major league players in Nigeria's democracy and the issues generated from its drive for growth and development. I am Ladi Akiridoluale. Thanks for joining us. We're still going on with our conversation on the 50th anniversary of the end of the Civil War in Nigeria, as well as the efforts towards healing, reconciliation, and reintegration. My guest is former Deputy Governor of Abia State, now Minority Leader of the 9th Senate, Enyinnaya Abaribe. Distinguished Senator, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
We're taking a look at 50 years after the horrific incident of 1967 to 70, referring to the Nigerian Civil War, which formally ended on the 12th of January. The documents were signed on the 15th. But our focus is on the hereafter, what happened after the incident. General Gawan, who was head of state at the time, talked about the 3 R's. Today, 50 years on, how would you assess how far we have come as a country on those 3 R's?
Well, let me start by saying that I think in my last interview with you, I had stated that the Nigerian state, that some of the actions that we see will tend to give the impression that there are still some repercussions from the Civil War being visited on the southeastern part of the country. And looking at it, the 3 R's were reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. I would say that maybe we started the reconstruction and left it. The rehabilitation and the reconciliation were also done halfway. Let me tell you what I mean. 9 years after the Civil War, which was by 1979, an Igbo man had become the vice president of this country. That is late Dr. Alex Ekwueme. In other words, the reconciliation was ongoing. But it looked like maybe a section of the victorious side didn't see that reconciliation being pursued at that time as what ought to be done, which was why by 1983 there was yet another coup, and that whole experiment was jettisoned. And throughout the period, of course, during the military interregnum between 1983 and when we got back to civilian rule again in 1999, you will also observe that in 1999, the major person whose ideas were driving the PDP as a party was same Dr. Kweme, and most of us who backed him also thought that having shown courage, having shown leadership, and having been able to build the party called PDP to be a very viable political party, that he will also be given the opportunity to direct the affairs of this country. But you could see the intrigues that went on. In a short while, everything was turned upside down, and General Obasanjo was rewarded with the presidency. Now, what has happened since then has been that there has been a gradual, I would say, reduction of the impact of the Igbo in Nigerian affairs. And so most of the people down in the southeast have seen it or perceive it as a policy that is deliberate. And it is deliberate to make sure that there is a glass ceiling that people don't break through. And so the man on the street, if you're driven out of the civil service, you're driven out of the military, you're driven out of the police, so you just end up being traders only. And of course, when you make money from trading, then people turn around and envy you, and all manners of policies are put in place to make sure that you can't even, survive with that. And so this has led to the resentment that you see. It has also led to the separatist movements and has also fueled the agitation by the younger elements to say, what are we doing with this contraption called Nigeria? And it worries us. The reason why it worries us is that we know that no country can survive 2 civil wars. I do not think that that will happen, but it just looks as if there is a deliberate plan and they're pushing everybody to now say, take up arms and defend yourself. And I do not know whether those in authority today really sit back and ask questions of themselves to say, where we're going, is it really the right path? I think we saw a publication, a news item about the replacement of the lady Azinge, who was in Corporate Affairs Commission, with yet another person from the north. I mean, and it now looks as if, okay, so you sack this person here, then you replace him with a northerner. I mean, the point really is this. Are we actually in the same country? If all of us are equal partners in this country, then that means that those who are in charge of affairs ought to obey the laws. The laws of the country insist that you must have federal character in all your appointments, and it's there. It's a law. There's even a commission. And everybody just starts to wonder, why would a government ignore its own laws? And so if you bring this in whole context, you now see why people of the Southeast feel that the Civil War is still not over. Because the essential thing is that if you defeat a people, then of course you loot, plunder, and take over every aspect of their lives. But in 1970, we were told, no victor, no vanquished. These were things that brothers misunderstood themselves, and we have come back to. Of course, in 1970, every person from the Southeast who had a bank account was subjected to having only 20 pounds. Only. Including those who had millions in their accounts. And the accounts were there in the balances, and of course everybody was given. And so people had to pull up themselves by their bootstraps. Those policies and all those things were done. I don't think it was done with the assumption of no victor, no vanquished in mind. Because if there's no vanquished, then you ought not to take all my savings and give me back something else.
Now which kind cable you gon' need to light up your house, eh? come and see. Now come and be the Baba. Old man won't light up your light. Now come and be the Baba. Come and see. Now come and be the C-O-L-E-M-A-A. Quality, quality. To the bull, to the bull. Now come and be the Baba.
At this stage, many of those, because what you've said is at the governmental level.
Yeah.
In terms of the people themselves, and when I say the people, I mean the peoples of Nigeria as a whole, including the Southeasterners, they seem to have moved on.
I do not think that the problem is with the people. The people have moved on. The people are, they intermarry, they go anywhere. People live everywhere. There's no part of this country that you won't find somebody from the
Southeast.
From the Southeast living there without any problem. The people seem to have dealt with the matter personally. That means that there must be a mindset of the government side where these policies that tend to, create imbalance is, put in place.
Now, there are people who suggest that, again, going back to 1970 that you mentioned, that even in government at the time, deliberate effort or deliberate policies were put in place. I'll just take two, which endure till today. One was the National Youth Service Corps,
yeah,
which tended to take people everywhere, especially the young at the time.
Yeah.
The second was like a corollary of the first, which was the unity schools,
yeah,
which almost made it mandatory that young students of secondary school age found themselves in parts of the country that otherwise, but for that policy, they wouldn't have found themselves. So when we talk today, do you think that it is possible that those products of such deliberate policy can overhaul this imbalance that you describe? Because they don't seem to be concerned. They've seen beyond this. And as you pointed out, they've moved on in the way that they can personally.
Let me put it this way. Late Professor Tekena Tamuno, I think, who was, the Vice Chancellor.
Sort of the University of Ibadan.
Of University of Ibadan. I think I read at the time that he was retiring. He gave a lecture. I may not quote him verbatim, but it goes something like, all things bright and beautiful, which is a Christian song. Usually the refrain is, the good Lord made them all. But, in his own, he said, all things bright and beautiful in Nigeria. Nigeria kills them all. So you see this problem. NYSC, beautiful concept. But today, after a little while, people were now saying, why won't you scrap it? You understand? Mm-hmm. Which means the usefulness has more or less been eroded. The use of NYSC to bind people, to make us, now has been overtaken by all manners of things. Same thing with the unity schools. At the point at which people were in the unity schools, you're supposed to set equal standards for everybody, because that is the essence of it. You take people from all over the country, they compete, they go to school. But right now, at the point at which somebody from a particular state will have done so well, he has a very high rating, yet he can't enter the unity school because somebody from another state in which they're trying to do some balancing is done so badly, yet is given opportunity to come. And so it is this, which means that that has also been bastardized in some way. So good concepts, good ideas, great vision, then implementation, some people bend it to their own uses. If you leave Nigerian youth and Nigerians alone, they probably will solve the problem. But because we still have, I'm now 60, well, in a few months I'll be 65. So most of us, this age and above, still are in what the youth will call the analog era.
Indeed.
And because we're in the analog era, and we have been able to use the system in this disjointed manner to give ourselves advantages, we tend to want to perpetuate it with the younger people. And so competition is no longer there. So every young person that comes to my office today to seek for an opportunity to have a job, the first thing he will tell you is, please, sir, can you give me a letter? Let me take it to this place. In other words, as far as they are all concerned, you can't get anything on merit anymore. You can't get anything on the fact that you qualify and you have done better than yours. So how will you have a society of this nature? It's a society that we must have to find a way of, reversing.
Some people have, because now moving on to what needs to be done now. Yeah. Because there are quite a lot of people who say that we seem to be, depending on who it is, either at the edge, crossroads, decision point. What needs to be done? And from some of those I have spoken to, both on and off the record, have said we may need to take a drastic step, such as the Rwandan example.
And what is the Rwandan example?
By that, they mean that Rwanda had a similar, well, not exactly similar, but something that had to do with the kind of episode that Nigeria dealt with in 67, 70, in 1994, for a much shorter period. But that in the aftermath of that, to enforce or to bring about unity, cohesion, and national development, amongst other things, for example, they abolished the use of ethnic groupings. So in Rwanda, for example, you have only Rwandans.
So
you
there are no more
groups.
Hutus and Tutsis and all that.
By law, you are not allowed to. ID cards and other such documents make no reference to ethnicity. Using that as a base, because I mean, again, others have said there are only 4 million or so people in Rwanda, so that may not be able to work here.
Yeah.
But using that as the kind of radical or drastic decision, what would you recommend that we do now? Given what you've told me today and what you had told me in our previous interaction when you talked about the fact that the younger elements are restive because they're asking those of you who still continue to say, look, this can be done within the ambits of peace and negotiations and so on, and that you may be angling for conflict, possibly because you've never participated in an actual conflict. But what is to be done now to ensure that this is our case?
Well, I think maybe what needs to be done is for the president of Nigeria today, because every time we talk, everybody runs away from really asking the president of Nigeria today to actually look in the mirror. And I say it with all sense of responsibility. The laws are there. All the different things that will make us whole is there. But when you ignore it and you continue doing things as if there is only one set of people in this country, those who you recognize, then you will continue to have this problem. And I just told you, just look at, perception actually is what a lot of people see as their reality. Perception. So you may sit and say, no, I'm doing the right thing as far as I'm concerned. But if the perception from the other person is that you're not, then you actually need to review and say, why is he not seeing me this way? That's what I mean.
Now which kind cable you gon' need to light up your house, eh? Oh man, na quality cable. Coleman quality. Coleman wire. Coleman durable. Coleman cable. Coleman tank. Coleman cable for any kind of project. Now come and be the bar. Come and see. Now come and be the bar. Coleman won't light up your light, eh? Now come and be the bar. Come and see. Now come and be the COLEMAN. Quality. Durable. Oh yeah. Now come and be the barber.
When General Obasanjo was president, you couldn't accuse him of an ethnic slant. When Yar'Adua was president, you couldn't also do that. So why is it that you're accusing President Buhari of an ethnic slant? So maybe we all need to take a step back and now ask ourselves, what is it that we're doing that gives this impression? Because it is the impression that is fueling everybody's actions. And of course, an action will bring a reaction and all that. And before you know it, at the point at which we were shouting and screaming, that people were coming into this country and killing everybody everywhere, and nothing is being done. And it looks like they had an impetus to do it. You understand? Now the Southwest, from what we can understand, are now organizing their own security outfit to be able to help the security agents, because after a little while, it was impossible for you to drive along inside the Southwest. People were being kidnapped every day and it all turns out to be the same set of people, these so-called herdsmen. And it looked as if, are we just going to be overwhelmed by this? Now, there is a reaction to it. And what you now see is a counter-reaction. Oh, the governors in there are setting up themselves to be able to have their own different country. And it just goes back to the fundamental basis. If you are even-handed, and if you follow the law as it is, and if you say this is the best way for us to go, then we wouldn't have all the security heads in this country in the hands of only the people from the north, so-called. You wouldn't have both the police and everybody from the so-called. You will do things that will tend to give every other section of this country a sense of belonging. And it is this lack of having a sense of belonging that is leading people to feel that we may be heading to the brink. I can restrain myself. But if you're a 20-year-old, 25-year-old, no work, nothing, you will say, what have I got to lose? That is just the point we don't want this country to get to. And 50 years after the Civil War, haven't lost the opportunities that we could have gained from the Civil War. Opportunities meaning that we had refineries in Biafra, we had all manners of things, we had rockets, so we could have actually become a technologically advanced country more than we have today. But what happened? There was an effort to close down everything, make sure that it doesn't show up again, for reasons that nobody could decipher except for fear of a particular group. Because if that had been done, maybe we wouldn't have having all these problems where we can't even refine our own fuel within our own country for whatever reason. You know, so we see ourselves stuck today and going around in circles. So there must be, the hallmark of a great leader is that when you see that this thing is not working, you should ask yourself, how and what do I do? And it is purely the responsibility of the leadership. I won't, from outside, be able to do it. It is the man who has the levers of power that will also make those decisions in the interest of...
Distinguished Senator, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
That's today's episode of These Nights. Do let us know what you think of the conversation. The handles are right there on your screen. Thanks for watching. I'm Ladi Akiri Bye.